Good evening. Welcome. Last week we had conflicting schedules, so we had to sort of forget Wednesday night, but we're here again. If I have some voice problems, excuse me. Still trying to get on top of some physical things. I thank everybody for their prayers. Let's just open with a word of prayer. Lord, we just thank you for everything, and we ask that you come down in a very powerful way tonight and encourage, inspire, anoint. Anoint your speaker, inspire those who hear the word. In spite of all the challenges, may they hear it in a clear, plain way that will touch their lives. We thank you for the ministry of the Holy Spirit. Thank you for the opportunity of protecting your word, of ensuring your word, of making it and keeping it powerful because it's living. And it's for today. And so we thank you for everything, and we praise you for how wonderful you are. And we just say this in your name. Amen. You know, we're in Ecclesiastics. We've been considering much of Ecclesiastics through the perspective of a philosopher, not a preacher. The philosopher asks questions and studies on it to see if they can see reason for something. A pastor will answer questions in the simplest form. Now, philosophers study the matter. Preachers approach it from a childlike faith that simply accepts the matter for what it is. God says it. It's so. It's what it is. And it's by faith that I accept it as so. Now, the thing the preacher is concerned about the most is, does whatever going on lead you back to God as to his truth? It always has to come back to God for the preacher, or he has failed. It always comes back to God's truth, or he has failed. He's not really the preacher of the word then. And today, in a lot of places, I don't see it coming back to God. I don't see it coming back to Christ and him crucified. So much of what we see ends with man feeling good about himself, rather than man having a realistic perspective of himself in light of God. We often have to consider whether what the preacher teaches and preaches brings us back to the simplest terms, or whether it turns into a confusing mess referred to as knowledge or enlightenment. Knowledge about, enlightenment about something. The fact is, life is part of a cycle. It's that simple. A cycle that will not change, but there are factors that can disrupt it. And we read some of those cycles. Let's look at chapter 1 in Ecclesiastics. We're going to look at 5 through 7. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to his place where he arose. The wind goes towards the south, and turns about unto the north, whirls about continually, and the wind returns again according to its circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Into the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. Now this is the cycle of life. It is what is. It always has been from the beginning of man in the Garden of Paradise. Nothing has changed in that way. Now, the only thing is that once in a while, factors can disrupt it. But I want you to consider what Proverbs 30 says. If you go back there, because we talked about generations, how generations go from generations. And we're going to be looking at, by the way, chapter 30, verses 11 through 14. Now, when I first read these verses, I was shocked. It was all there, very simple. He's going to tell you about 4 generations. I want you to consider the generation we might be in today, because we're in one of those generations. So let's look at what it says. It says, there's a generation that curses their father and doth not bless their mother. Wow. Do we see cursing the fathers and people who refuse to bless their mothers? Goes on, there's a generation that are pure in their own eyes, and yet is not washed from the filthiness. Very interesting way of saying here about the generations and how they perceive themselves. Then it goes on to say, there's a generation, oh how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. In other words, there's a generation that's full of arrogance, self-will, having it on their terms. Now look at this last generation he talks about. There's a generation whose teeth are as swords, and their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from off the earth, and the needy from among men. He's talking about 4 types of generations here. And he's not talking about any perfect generation. They're all corrupt in something, in some way. I want you to know every generation is corrupt. I watched my generation in the 60s. You talk in the 60s and 70s. You talking about a generation going downhill, sliding right into hell. Boy, that generation did. With all of its self-love and all of its free love and all of its Marxists and communists that came out of colleges that are now our leaders and taken this nation right down to the pit of hell. Now, generations come and go. Okay, they digress, and only individuals, please hear me, who make the right decision emerges from their particular generation, regardless of what it is. You have to come out and be separate from your generation's lies, deceptions, or attitudes. And the only way you can do that is line up to the Word of God. Believe it, line up to it, obey it. Now, as we look at this, we can go on, and we have to realize that man is the one that's always trying to change seasons by disrupting the order of creation. See, if anything's out of order, it's man. He's the only one out of order in creation. Nothing else gets out of order but man. Man has that choice, man has that preference to be his own God, to be his own dictator, to call the shots. Man is out of order. The more man gets out of order, the more creation mourns under their sins. The more that God has to withhold his blessings. Whether it's the sun causing drought, whether it's withholding the waters. I don't know how many you know that we're coming to Thanksgiving, but the pilgrims came here searching for God, for their own way to serve God with their own conscience. Now, the Pilgrims and what they often show are the Puritans came. They show the Puritans coming over first. No, they did not come over first. The Puritans are the ones that wore the hats and the particular clothes that they show. Pilgrims wore ordinary peasant clothes. They were peasants. The Puritans were those from high elites that were trying to bring government and God together. And the Pilgrims were on their pilgrimage to find a place where they could worship God with freedom. Many died in their voyages. Boy, you listen to their stories and you think it's grace of God they got here. But they have these wrong portrayals so many times. And so if you read the history of the religious reality of these people, when they forgot God, God held the water back, the rains back. And they would all of a sudden get hold of themselves and say, you know, God's not blessing us. Boy, I wish this nation would get that. God's not blessing us. And they'd get on their knees and they'd pray and they'd repent and God would send the water again. Read that so many times. We don't get that history though. But anyway, man is always the one out of order. God is always trying to bring man back into order. In what? In light of that he's God, man is subject to God. Not the other way around. So many times man exalts himself and tries to control God. That's out of order. It's true man's trying to change the seasons, okay? However, he will never stop the sun from shining. Okay, if anyone does that, God will. But he can't. He will never stop the winds from blowing or the rivers from flowing. Sure, he can influence the winds with chemtrails. He can use HAARP machines to cause storms. That's all true. But I want you to know something. And he can dam up the water too. But man can play God all he wants, but God will use man to do his bidding in the end. That's the reality. God will bring about prophetic events by using man's stupidness and foolishness and evil to bring about events that in the end will devour him and judge him. God's capable of doing that. You know, Satan may rear his ugly head, which he does, but guess what? Not without God's permission to do so. Because people hear me, God has Satan on a leash. Now, man may scheme, he may plan, and begin to execute a matter, but God determines how far he will get before he steps on the scene and says, enough is enough. And when that happens, there's not going to be any debate. There's not going to be any discussion. There's going to be silence. There's going to be mourning. There's going to be weeping. There's going to be gnashing of teeth. But in spite of it all, every man will bow his knee. Every creature will bow their knee and declare what we know: Jesus is Lord over all. Now, we can get in all these debates. So much of what life brings us seems like familiarity, where everything seems normal. But if you're honest with yourself, we have to admit nothing remains so. Nothing remains so. Changes may be slight to those who live in the midst of them, and they may not disrupt all their normalcy all the time. And if they do, that's when they're noted. But change comes. Change is always occurring all around, but man fails to see it. He just sees the familiarity of things. Unless they are drastic, these changes, man simply flows with the cycle of life, and he sometimes grumbles along the way that nothing changes, like the children of Israel. I want you to look at verse 8 with me now. In Ecclesiastes 1. If you're not back there. Let's look at 8. He says, all things are full of labor. I want you to know that. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Now I want you to think about what he's saying there. You might think the preacher is changing course here, but he really isn't. He is reminding us that no matter what we do in this world, labor is involved in it. Now, man may be looking for an easy way to do things. He may be looking for shortcuts. He may be looking for an easy way out. He may be trying to avoid some type of labor. But I want you to know, even all these things come with labor. I know. Let me give you an example. Even laziness entails labor. We don't realize that. What's the labor? To play some game. Okay? That's labor. To play some game to avoid sweating or doing something they don't want to do. Okay? Of course, they have their reason for it, right? The reason is the eye is never satisfied. The eye is never satisfied. Whether that eye is looking at something and say, I can't do it. Whether that eye is looking at something and emotionally it doesn't set me off to do it. Whatever. The eye is never satisfied. The eye is always saying, well, you could have that. Or you could get that this way. Or you could, but you can have it without laboring for it. I think that's the greatest labor of all, trying to figure out how to get something without laboring for it. I know. I've been in that situation. Okay? The eye is never satisfied. It's called the lust of the eyes. It sees, it imagines, and it desires. It's never satisfied. Now, it may require scheming to steal. It may require manipulation to possess. Or hard work to secure. But there's always labor in coveting something. We don't even realize it. There's labor in it. And that's what he's trying to get to. And whether that labor has any integrity or whatever, it involves laboring. Well, he's trying to figure it out. You know, I remember being in the Navy. We had a chief we didn't like. He was a jerk. And it didn't matter what we did, he never appreciated, he never saw it, never gave us any compliments. So we decided, you know what, this guy complains when we do it. This guy doesn't recognize, so we're not going to do anything. So we worked so hard to figure out how to get out of work, we might as well have done it. We had to set up this elaborate situation where we had to have mirrors set a certain way so we could see him come, so we could get up and start working. And all that time we were bored. You know how much labor is involved in being bored? So that's when I decided, this is stupid. Let's just get up and do our work. Whether he acknowledges it or not, I don't give a rip. We just need to do our work. Because I found out that working gets me through the day quicker. I feel better. I have more constructive attitude about myself. And so I thought, let's just do the work. I learned a lot about working in the Navy, by the way. Okay? Well, I learned there's a lot of labor in that laziness. Trying to get around something. You have to begin to understand there's labor in everything. It says the ear is not filled with hearing. Hearing what? The ear is not content to hear truth, but everything else. Okay? I want you to think about that for a second. The ear is never filled, especially if it doesn't want truth. Because the only thing that brings satisfaction to us is truth. Truth satisfies, truth sets free, truth brings a semblance of understanding. But the ear doesn't want to hear truth. So, what does the ear want to hear? Think about that for a minute. And when the ear hears it, is it satisfied? No. You can see it. So let's look at the ear for a minute. How many want to hear the truth or confirm their reality? Their reality. The problem with confirming your reality is you can't get enough confirmation because it never plays out right. You're always looking for that confirmation. You're always looking to be affirmed. If you want to be flattered, if you want to be conned, if you want to live in a false reality, your reality is so fragile that it must be constantly affirmed by everybody around you. The ear that doesn't want truth is never satisfied. That's why the ear is never filled. Okay? It's not satisfied. The truth is, man prefers flattery over truth. I hear it all the time. One of the men that tells the truth is his initials are John D.J.T. They call him D.J.T. Who is he? He tells the truth. Oh, no, I don't like him. I hate him. You know, I hear nothing but that. But he tells the truth. What they want to hear is flattery. What they want to be is conned. What they want to be is feel good about the lies that are being told them. But what they don't understand is they're never satisfied. If one is telling the truth, they hate him for it. They resent him for it because he doesn't say it just right. He doesn't say it in a way that makes them feel good or whatever. I don't really care. But the eye, the ear are never satisfied. You see, they prefer flattery over truth. They wish to be conned with fantasy that leaves them unrealistic, fables that leave them foolish and silly and stupid. Such labor is wearisome. If there's no substance, if there's no truth, if there's no value, there's no worth, it leaves them weary. But they still prefer it. It leaves them fragile, but they still prefer it. Because when the truth does come along and slam them against the wall, they don't know what to do with it. So such labor to maintain our reality, such labor to be lazy, to manipulate, to do whatever we have to be lazy, so I don't have to face life. You see, laziness is usually a product of fear. Fear of facing life. Fear of being a failure. Fear of being inept. And why are you a failure? Because you do nothing. Why are you inept? Because you won't challenge yourself. How many people are living in the basement out of fear? And their families are supporting their tail ends instead of saying, look, we all have fear. We've all had to face it. Grow up and face it. Face your failures. Face those things and find out who you are. We don't have parents, grandparents that have the guts to do it. Because they don't want to be bothered with it. You know why? Because they like being lazy. They don't want to have to sit in there and wrestle with them. Because they let them get away with all kinds of things. Excuses after excuses. So I want you to look at with me back to Proverbs 30. Read Proverbs 30 one of these days. It's really pretty incredible what it says. This guy's closing up Proverbs. I want you to look at 15:19. There's so much here, but I'm only going to cover a little bit here. It says, the horse leech has two daughters crying, give, give. Boy, how many times do we hear that? Give, give. There are three things that are never satisfied. Yea, four things. Say not, it is enough. They're always saying it's not enough. The grave is not enough. And the barren womb is not enough. The earth that is not filled with water is not enough. The fire saith not, it is enough. The eye that mocketh at his father and despises to obey his mother. The ravens of the valley shall pick it out, and the young eagles shall eat it. You talk about the end results of things. There will be three things which are too wonderful for me yea, for which I know not. The way of an eagle in the air. Notice these are all doing constructive things. The way of a serpent upon a rock. The way of a ship in the midst of the sea. And the way of a man with a maid. These things, they often say, it's not enough. So you go on and you read the rest of that stuff, and it really lays things out for you. The eye of lust will say it's not enough. Okay? You have an eye of lust, will say it's never enough. I must have this. I must possess it to be happy. Enough is never enough. There are people in your life that say, am I asking too much? By asking you for this one thing. I'm always asking, all I want you to do is this one thing for me. And they act like they'll be happy if you do. You know what? If you do it, they'll ask you one more thing. One more thing. Because it will never be enough for them. People have to learn contentment, people. We don't learn it by getting our way and being spoiled. We learn it through thankfulness of what we have. That's why we have so much discontentment, because people are not thankful for what they have. They don't recognize what they have. Because the lust of the eye say, I want more. The lust of the ear says, I want to hear what I want to hear. And it's never enough. You see, for people to say, just one more thing I ask of you, what they're asking will cost you, but not them. You see, if something doesn't cost us, we don't know how to be thankful. We really don't have enough to be thankful. We're saying to ourselves, if we just had this one more thing, I'd be happy. No, you're not thankful in the first place. If you're not thankful, you're never going to be happy. And you will never have enough. Our generations, if you look at their major underlying problem, is they're as ungrateful as they can be. Ungrateful. They don't understand sacrifice. They don't know what it means to truly earn something. They're not paying consequences. And that is what's going on in our society today. The ear wants to control what it hears. It doesn't want the truth. It can't hear enough to let something be unless it fits into what it wants to hear. Now, there has to be, for those whose ear is never enough, this reassurance. You talk about a trap. We had a person who had to be reassured about their stupid, silly realities all the time. It never ends. You know what's sad? We play into their games. Then we wonder why we have a bunch of losers on our hands. Let's look at verse 9 in Ecclesiastes 1. Sorry, gotta get back there. It says, the thing that has been, it is that which shall be. I want you to really get this. This may seem confusing. The thing that has been, in other words, what has been, what? It is that which shall be. It's going to be that way. So get over yourself, is what he's saying. Then he goes on, he says, and that which is done is that which shall be done. Hey, what's been done? Quit crying over spilled milk. It's done. Get over it. And then he says, there is no new thing under the sun. Think about that statement for a while. There is no new thing under the sun. The preacher is saying, what is so will continue to be so. So get over it. Accept it. He's saying, remember that is not what the lustful eye wants to accept or the ear wants to hear. Get over it. It is what it is. Quit looking backwards. Quit thinking if and why and all these other things, and accept what is. Now, if I could summarize it, I'd say 2 words: grow up. In other words, grow up. You have people who don't want to accept the way things are. You have, why? Why won't they accept it? You know, I at one time wrote this, journal for somebody. And what I told this person, because I wrote journals for different people, your problem is you won't accept the way things are. My question is why? Why won't you accept the way things are? You can't change the past. You're not going to change the present. And if you try to, you're still not going to change the fruits of the future. Now, I don't know how many times I asked that person, why won't you just accept? Why are you restless? You can't change the past. It is what it is. You can't change the present. It is what it is. I have to ask people that all the time. Well, of course, the reason that they want to change is because it doesn't fit in their way of thinking, their reality. They want to control. They want to change. They want to situate or adjust something to what? Their way of thinking. They can't just let things be. They have to poke the sleeping lion to awaken it, to move it. They have to kick the rock the snake is content under, to remove any possible threats, I guess, or any surprises in their life they can't control. They just can't let it be. Because somehow they must come out right, or come out on top, or come out in control of something. Yet what is it? They can't change the reality of the situation. And that's what he's saying. You can't change the past. You can't change the present. So get over it. Why should you be surprised by such things in the first place? Not only can they not accept the past that will never change, but they won't be able to accept the future because they can't accept the present. Until we accept the present, nothing is going to change about the future. If we can't accept the past, we're not going to be able to be established in the present because we're too much mourning the past and looking back to enjoy what is in the present. I have seen so many people who live in regret. While they live in regret of the past, they're missing special opportunities in the present. And so when they get past the present, they have regrets about missing those opportunities. You talk about a cycle. That's man's cycle. And he gets himself in it all the time. It's all because he will not accept what the preacher's saying. You can't change it. It is what it is. You can't control it. If only we would accept what is, that we can make peace with the past, stand in the present by faith, and walk into the future with hope. What has been done, what is being done, what has been done is the way life is. Therefore, what will be so in the end. Do I sound like a sober pessimist, or am I a realist when I say that? Am I sad or sober when I say it? Am I being hopeless or am I being reflective? What the preacher says about it all is summarized this way. There is no new thing under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. So think about that for a second. You see, when we are up against a reality, and we are up against a reality called the great battle. It's a battle in this world. We are up against this reality of what's going on in our life today, okay? But you can't get it through people's head. It's not political. It's not about politics or parties. It's not about whether you like somebody's personality, whether you agree with them politically. Please get in your head. The battle is between light and darkness, between evil and good. That's the battle. The rest is immaterial. Quit looking at man. The Bible says we fight against flesh and blood. We do not fight against flesh and blood. How many times does the Bible have to tell us that? Our battles with the unseen, the light, the darkness, the evil, the good. Why do we talk about politics? I don't talk about politics because I agree with it. I talk about politics to show the fruit of it. And we won't even get down to the fruit of it. We're too busy trying to be right about our stands, about our preferences. We're missing the point. The preacher says, what is what is. We have to get past those things and see what's really going on. But we're too stuck in trying to be right about our conclusions instead of seeing the real battle. Until you accept things the way they are, you can't see them for what they are. Our greatest battles with people who insist on their stupid realities. That's not true. Who are not open to hear what's really going on, so that they can truly address what is so. You can't get people past their low, morbid realities to see what's going on, to see the bigger picture. And people, there's a bigger picture. There always is. You contend with people, not so you can be right, so that when that reality hits them right square in the face, they still can stand, because they're not insisting on being ignorant about it. And they will see it for what it is. We have to get people past their stupid little realities. So we're up against a spiritual battle. We always have been. In the past, what addressed our past is the cross of Christ. What addresses our present is the Word of God and God's truth. And what will address our future is by standing on the truth and insisting on righteousness in our life. God's way of doing things, which is excellent, by the way. You see, we think our times are the worst of times. We lament, we mourn, and wallow around like victims of it all, pointing fingers here and there. But I want to ask you something. Do you think the digression of this present generation is any different than past generations? Do you really think that? You think that what we're seeing is new, worse, different. Does your concept of today, does that imagine your concept of today give you an excuse to cop out on what is true? To dismiss it? Does that give you a right? I have a word for you. There's nothing new under the sun. So what can you learn from the past that keeps you from being foolish today? What can someone tell you that will help you to address today instead of be ignorant in denial of it? Jesus told us that the last generation, Jesus told us the last generation would be like the days of Noah. I want you to think about that. You think about the sin, the depravity. You think it's new? You think the sin we see today, the depravity we see today is new? Do you think the wicked imaginations that have gone into the deepest pit is new? There's nothing new under the sun. You think that the testing of your faith is great right now? Unbearable? Ridiculous? Do you think that? Consider Job. Consider Job and tell me that. Tell me you're an exception and not the rule. Because when we become an exception, then we don't have to be accountable for how we respond. Because there's been nothing like it before. Do you think as believers you should be immune from trials and tribulations of the days you live in? Consider the children of Israel. Go one step farther, consider the nation of Israel. The Holocaust. Do you think it's new? You say, but you don't understand. I should be immune. I'm part of the church. You think that's a new thing? You're part of the church? Well, guess what? The children of Israel said, we're biological children of Abraham. This shouldn't be happening to us. And many walked away from their faith in Jehovah God. I've read about it. Nothing new under the sun. When are we going to get that? Matthew 5:45, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. There's nothing new. You think you're living in the most insane times as you watch this nation go in the cesspool, the sewer? Consider the great empires before us. Rome. Look at Alexander the Great's life. Just look at it. Look at all these great empires that reach tremendous peaks. We can never be defeated. We will never be brought down. They're in the dust right now. You think it's all new under the sun? What we're experiencing, what we're seeing? Please hear me. If God doesn't intercede, America's going to be buried just like those empires. There's nothing new under the sun. How about the condition of the church? Oh, these are the worst conditions of the church in America. In the world. There's persecution all over the place. Really? Read Revelations chapter 2 and 3. Judgment begins in the house of God. Read them about the churches. Nothing new under the sun, including the challenges to the churches. Including the challenge to the church in America. There's nothing new under the sun happening. You think the idea of globalism is new? A one-world government is new? Really? Check out Babel and Nimrod. Look at Hitler and Stalin and tell me that. Look at the great moves of Hinduism to take over the whole world. Catholicism, Mormonism, with their religions. Nothing new under the sun. Do we have new and different challenges than anybody else? No. But I'll tell you what we do have. We have the lessons from the past if we have the guts to look at it and learn from them. But we don't want to hear the history. We don't want to study the history. We're too lazy. We just want to believe what these communist, Marxist newscasters tell us. You think what's happening in America is today new? Read about Nazi Germany. We're going down their same path. There's nothing new under the sun. You think you have had it worse than others? You think your lot in life has been unfair? That you've been unjustly deprived of what? You think you have been unfairly treated because of race, gender, creed. Therefore, you have a right to be bitter, judgmental. You have the right to label other people. You have the right to step on other people. You have the right to use other people. You have the right to live like a devil. Here it comes, people. Nothing new. Do you think because your ancestors were slaves that you got a right to turn around and enslave other people? You think because of race, color, and creed, you have a right to enslave other people because it happened to your ancestors? Well, as your teachers, there's nothing new under the sun. And what you have to learn is what attitude did they have. And I can tell you something else that's not new. You have the same attitude. I've heard it time and time again. There's nothing new under the sun. So, because your ancestors were enslaved, because things haven't gone your way, because things haven't treated you right, you can be a bully. You can justify your own prejudice. You think slavery originated with your people. Really? There's nothing new under the sun. There's always been slaves. They've been from every race. Two wrongs don't make a right. But that is what our culture, woke, political correctness, and everything else is teaching us. Every label is to divide. Every label is to make you superior so you can step on other people's head and feel justified in it. There's nothing new under the sun. Your problem is you won't accept that. Your problem is you want to label it. Your problem is you want an excuse to be the very thing that you hate. And in the process, you're going to hate yourself. Because you're the mirror of it. There's nothing new under the sun. Whereas tyranny, slavery, bullying, and excuses for past and present wretchedness. Whether it's your wretchedness or others' wretchedness, think again. Think again. It's nothing new under the sun. Nothing originated with your race. Nothing originated with you, including sin. Including your excuses. Why you don't want to choose the excellent way. Why you don't want to choose God's way. Why you don't want to do it right. See, I'm not just talking about the fools out there. The fools on TV. The talking points. All mouth, no substance. I'm talking about Christians too. There's nothing new under the sun. So what I say, what else is not new when it comes to each generation are the excuses they have for being sluggard, rebellious, angry, irresponsible, whiny snowflakes. Whatever you want to call them. I have names too. I have labels too. Each culture, there's nothing new under the sun. Each culture has their form of pride that gives them the right to be prejudiced, elite, and judgmental. How about each leader's excuse to be the dictator of the world? Nothing new. Whether it's the Obamas, the Hitlers, Alexander the Great. It's nothing new under the sun. Each person's prejudice is nothing new. The endless excuses to practice great abominations, there's nothing new. How many of you realize that just before every society came down, it was just after they approved of the abominations that we're seeing today in our culture? These people who want to live as they want to live are bringing judgment on this nation. And they're not going to be able to see even to the end. And they're going to destroy every child in the process. They're going to destroy every future generation. And these fools that advocate it, they're going to be screaming on their way down to hell. There's nothing new. There's no argument you can use that's going to be new for sinning. The complaining. Today I was watching on the news 4 women taking Idaho to court over the abortion issue because they had to go to another state. And they suffer such incredible things. Well, first of all, I hate to tell them, their health is not part of the Constitution. They're responsible for their health. They're responsible for their moral conduct. And if they had to leave this state to go get an abortion and their families weren't with them, take their families with them and pay the price. Because this state's not responsible for their moral conduct. Not responsible to take care of whatever they were trying to take care of. When are we going to get that? Do I think they'll get far? Oh, they'll make a lot of noise. But our Constitution says, yes, we will help somebody in trouble. But you see, they got in trouble when they went and got the abortion in another state. We're not responsible for that other state. People, there's nothing new under the sun. So my question is, what excuse do you have for thinking that you're an exception to this time you're living in? That something should treat you different, that someone owes you something. Because it's not what you think. You deserve better. It's all unfair. That everybody should bow down to your way of thinking. I'm afraid that's the way our nanny culture has become with young people. That's nothing new. That was happening before communism took over and fascism took over with our young people. You know what the preacher did? By making that one simple statement, nothing new under the sun, he took away the excuses. He brought each of us down to the same level with each other, on the same playing field of lust and sinful humanity. He brought us down to the same level. People, what separates us is not our circumstances. It's not our lot in life. It's not our challenges. It's not our trials. Rather, our decisions and choices. How we respond to, above all, the cross of Christ, which deals with our past. What we do with Jesus now, that deals with our present. And what we're going to do with His Word, day by day, that will determine and ensure what our future holds for us. You know why? Because there's nothing new happening under the sun.